All right, we are live here with a Schloss rant, August 10th, 2023. We're going to get into a variety of different topics here. This could be called a mega pod, a mega rant. We're going to cover pretty much it all. We're going to talk about the top months for sports. We're going to talk about some no dates for those of you who are looking to get engaged or married, where you just cannot get involved with those type of activities, having people in your wedding on different particular dates. We're going to obviously break down the Jets and Hard Knocks. We're going to talk about the top 10 quarterbacks. We're going to take a look at Mike Sando's QB tier list and the top 10 guys there. We're going to talk about some future NFL Hall of Famers, guys who are still playing. And obviously, I have to touch on the embarrassment that is the New York Yankees. All right, so the first topic, this is not something that I would normally do. And once we get into football season, there's not going to be any time to break this down. But I feel like, we're into the middle of August with it being August 10th. And it kind of got me thinking, we're transitioning from baseball being the lead story now to football. I mean, first preseason game was Thursday, and football is here. It's definitely here. So it led me to think, what are the best months for sports watching? Because I know a lot of you all are, dialed into these teams, your favorite teams, whether it be in the NFL, Giants, Jets, Eagles for some of my people here locally in the Philadelphia area. The NBA, whoever your favorite team is, or maybe you have a favorite player, college basketball, the NHL, the Yankees, whoever. You root for all these teams, whether they're in the city you live in, the city you used to live in, maybe just the closest team to you, or maybe you just picked a random team because you liked a player or even the jerseys. So, you're watching all this, and it led me to think again, let's rank the months of the year based on the best sports watching. And this is a very subjective list, obviously. There's not like one particular thing that I could lean on and say that it would be number one. It's not like, is it a bulk of games? Is it, just the sheer number of volume of games? Is it the intensity of games? Is it, really all about football and the amount of football games there are? And it's just kind of like the feeling that I get where when it's that month, I'm real excited. All right, so with that in mind, let's give you the list. We're going to start actually at the bottom with number 12, and it's July. July is an absolutely brutal month for watching sports. I don't care about the MLB All-Star game, not even one bit anymore. I used to love watching the MLB All-Star game, big time rooting for the American League. It'd be the only time I would ever root for a Boston Red Sox player. And, I'd see all these guys go out of my fantasy baseball team. The first thing that comes to mind is really like Matt Kemp and Ryan Braun. This is going back a decade ago. And these were guys that, I wasn't really watching. I might have had the MLB package because I was still in Arizona for the majority of the year and I was checking out the Yankees when I could. So I would never really see these guys. And it was exciting to kind of see them on the field. And I try to count. And I split this fantasy baseball team going back 15 years with my buddy Eric. And, I'd watch these guys and I'd look up how many All-Stars we have playing in the game. So I like to watch them play live instead of just looking at their numbers. And we still play fantasy baseball. But I feel like if you want to check out guys' highlights, you can pop it on YouTube. The MLB is a pretty good YouTube channel. So July is number 12. August is number 11. That's the month we're in now. All I have to say about August is at least we can talk about football being close to be here. You can watch training camp practices. You can watch, a little more baseball. You can watch Hard Knocks. I guess we'll classify that as sports. So, again, there's not much, but the fact that at least we're getting closer to football puts it in a number 11. All right, number 10. This might surprise some of you. February. Yes, you have the Super Bowl. Super Bowl's in February now. It's been in February every year since I think '03 was the last one in January, so the one in '04 where the Patriots beat the Panthers for the 2003 season, right? So the Super Bowl's in February. Outside of that, I mean, this just like sports watching depression kind of sets in because you have nothing else going on. I mean, you might get the Phoenix Open if you're really into that, which is a great event to go to, but I don't know necessarily that qualifies for sports watching. A couple other little golf tournaments there, maybe the one in San Diego. I think it's either January or February, but the point is there's not much. Number 9 is April. The Masters is carrying this month along with the Final Four, which usually even the semifinals are in April. If this was just pick your favorite, 7-day stretch of Monday to Sunday, it would be the national championship game through the Masters week, throwing that little par 3 tournament in there on Wednesday as well. I think that's real exciting for just a straight 7-day stretch. But the month as a whole, I mean, yeah, opening day is sometimes in April, but there's not much going on. Number 8 is June. Okay, you have the NBA Finals, you have the Stanley Cup Finals, which is great. The late start to some of those games, though, is brutal. I mean, 8:40, 9 o'clock, 8:50, whatever it is, and we're talking here on the East Coast tipping off a basketball game. If it's 3 hours, you're staying up till midnight, which doesn't always work great with a 5:30 a.m. alarm. I liked it a little more in Arizona, but it's kind of brutal back here on the East Coast. The games are exciting, though, if you get a good finals. And we don't always get a good finals, but you usually have a few games here and there. And then the Stanley Cup, you usually see something that's pretty exciting. Even think back to like 2014 is the first moment that comes to mind with, I think it was not Blake Martinez, Alex Martinez, something like that, scoring the game-winning goal for the Stanley Cup champion Kings against the New York Rangers. Or, for a team that I root for, obviously, 2000, you want to talk about Jason Arnott finding the back of the net against the Dallas Stars, who are going for a repeat. So you get some exciting games there. Number 7 is January. I like the NFL playoffs, but honestly, with the NFL, the regular season is the main attraction. So it's tough for me to put it higher than 7. I think 7 is appropriately slotted. You have the college football national championship game, which has usually been a bust. I mean, TCU, Georgia, who could watch that? Alabama rolling teams, Georgia rolling teams. They're usually not particularly close. I mean, the Georgia-Alabama one where Georgia lost, that was exciting when Tua came off the bench. So you do get some exciting moments, but I think 7 is a good spot for January. Number 6, we're going November. I love Thanksgiving football, and I love that that's the month really where the contenders and pretenders really separate from each other in the National Football League. Number 5 is December, okay? NFL's marching on to the playoffs there. You've got random college football bowl games, which are always exciting for a multitude of different reasons. The Poinsettia Bowl, the Holiday Bowl, I don't even know anymore, the Tax Slayer Bowl. You get these random fun matchups, teams that don't always play each other. They can be very, very entertaining there. And the NBA on Christmas Day, even if there are NFL games that day, it's great. I prefer separation just so the NFL doesn't interfere with the NBA spotlight on Christmas Day. But even when you get both, you can kind of mix and match. You get 2 screens going, an iPad, tablet, along with the primary TV or your phone and the TV, whatever the case might be. You got a lot there between all of that stuff. Number 4 is September. Some people might have this month higher, but this is the time of the year where you first hear the pads smacking together, the helmets smacking together, and the first time that it counts. And just hearing that back on the air, it's unmatched. And, whether it was, and I know the YouTube Sunday Ticket is now all the rage, and I got YouTube TV, but all the rage with whether you have the Sunday Ticket streaming option or you have the traditional red zone, whether it be Siciliano or Hansen, and you'd hear them say 8 hours of uninterrupted football, whatever it is. That's exciting. So the first 4 weeks, especially when it's September, maybe it's only 3 sometimes, it's special when the National Football League is back for real on that Thursday night after Labor Day. You got that game with the defending champion. Sometimes it's on a Wednesday night as well if there's some type of conflict. The Giants and Washington did that to open the 2012 season. So September sits there at number 4 for me. Number 3 is May. Now, I mentioned the NBA and the NHL earlier. You've got the conference semifinals usually then and the conference finals then, and it's real exciting. It's not just a 1 versus 8 boring games like in the NBA. No offense to this year's Heat team because we know that they were unreal. But this year made me realize how much I really love May because my New York Knicks, your New York Knicks, our New York Knicks, to steal an Adam Shine little line there, they were in it in the second round against Miami, and they lost a pretty competitive series overall. And the New Jersey Devils, my beloved New Jersey Devils, who lost 4 games to 1 to Carolina, who was the better team. But you get the idea. It's exciting to have serious playoff hockey, and it's not just your teams because you get 2 series on each side, East and West, times 2 for the number of sports. I get it. Not everyone's a hockey fan, but for a normal sports fan, I'm real into hockey. So it makes sense for me. Number 2 is March. The Final Four is in April for the most part. We get it. But the first 2 weekends in March, they always deliver. It might be a random college team, it might be Florida Gulf Coast State. Maybe you just hate me so much that you were excited to see Princeton knock off my alma mater, the University of Arizona. But you get crazy upsets, and it's okay. And think about, even St. Peter's a couple of years ago. It's okay when you have that early on in the tournament, and it's exciting, and you don't know what's going to happen, and everyone is pretty much the whole country has bought into this time, and it's kind of almost like acceptable to just like ignore friends, ignore family, unless they want to come watch the basketball games with you. So it's great. Everyone's all in on that. Everyone's talking about it. Even your mother, your aunt, your grandaunt, your cousin, whoever that wouldn't know a basketball from a hockey puck, they're super into this time as well because they're like, oh, I'll fill out a bracket. We'll pick the most intimidating mascot and we'll see what happens here. So March is number 2. Number 1 is October. NFL is in full swing. And growing up someone as a Yankee fan, that's usually when the World Series was. They won the World Series in '09 in November. They lost the World Series in '01 in November. But for the most part, the Fall Classic, baseball playoffs also are in the beginning of October because the season usually doesn't end, you know, till the last weekend or so, or the first weekend in October, last weekend in September. So I'm all in there if you get me to baseball playoffs. Regular season is not as exciting, and I'll be super pumped this year, even if the Yankees aren't in it, which, newsflash, they're not going to be in it. We'll get more into that later. But I'll be super into the Major League Baseball playoffs, which take place for the most part in October. Maybe the World Series ends in November. I have not checked, but I love that just the NFL's in full swing. We're fully involved. If you're here on the East Coast, once you get to November, it's not beach season anymore. So those first 3 weeks or so in September, you might still be at the beach down there in Lido Beach on Long Island, or if you're in New Jersey or you're in the very eastern part of Pennsylvania like I am, the Jersey Shore, you're taking that 75-mile ride or so to the ocean like I do quite often on weekends, even into September since I've lived over here in the Philadelphia area. You're locked into checking the weather to see if the beach is great. And if the beach is great on a Sunday, you're watching the red zone on your phone. Or me as a Giant fan, there's been several times where I've brought my phone and I've sat there in my beach chair for the last time for the season and I had the Giants game on. Usually my favorite spot to go to the beach in September is Cape May because that is a little side note here, but Cape May, the beach is absolutely humongous and there's no one there. So you really feel like you have a beach absolutely to yourself. And it's a great scene there in September, sitting on the beach watching New York Giant football. But October is number 1 because the NFL is fully involved. And you also have the World Series and the playoffs going. Even the NBA and NHL, I didn't mention this, those are back in the mix too. So there are a few days where you could have all 4 of your teams possibly playing. So for me, the Giants, the Yankees, if they make a deep playoff run, which again, newsflash, they're not for this year, but you could have the Giants, the Yankees, the beloved New Jersey Devils, and everyone's New York Knicks. So those are the months of the year for sports based on, what the best time to watch is. Now, I bring this up because you all probably do this too. You scroll through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you see random pictures, weddings, engagements, whatever the case might be. And it's insane to me that you have people who are having wedding receptions, I don't know, Memorial Day weekend when the NBA playoffs are going on, or you have it on Saturday night, and there's a big time, making this up, Clemson, Florida State game. Miami, Virginia Tech, whatever the case may be, Alabama, LSU, whatever. So with that in mind, I'm going to give you the ideal time, kind of based on my little breakdown there, for when you should get married, and take this, with a grain of salt. Obviously, this is just coming from me as someone who historically has been a really big time sports fan, not just of the teams I root for, but just in general. So I think if you go July 1st to August 1st, and I know July 4th is in the mix there, I think there's nothing that can go wrong, because if there's nothing with football that can interfere. There's no Stanley Cup final or NBA final. If you're marrying someone, or if you have a buddy who's getting married, you know, who's super into a regular season baseball game, and I don't even care if this is Yankee Red Sox, it's going back to 2003 or 2004 when the rivalry was intense. They got to examine their priorities. So that July 1st to August 1st window was perfect. I got married on July 5th, 2021. So, picked a good date. I got married on a Monday, too. Not many people get married on a Monday. So keep that in mind also. All right. Now, let's get into more serious sports topics. Mike Sando is a guy who's been covering the NFL for a long time. I think he's with The Athletic now. He does his quarterback tier list, and you could probably find that on their website. But I just want to look at this from a top 10 perspective. I'm going to give you his list, then I'm going to give you my list, and we'll see how it compares. And I'm going to make some justifications where my differences are. So his list first. He's got Mahomes, duh. Burrow, duh. Allen, duh. Rodgers is 4. Herbert is 5. Hurts 6. Jackson 7th. Lawrence 8th. Dak Prescott 9. And Matt Stafford 10. Now, the first 3, Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, yeah, we can move on from that. So now we're at 4, and here's where my differences are. He's got Rodgers. Okay? Rodgers didn't even throw for 30 touchdown passes last year. He's on the downward cycle. I know, Jet fans, I'm breaking your heart. And again, we'll talk more about Hard Knocks in a little. I understand it's upsetting, but he's not the guy that won back-to-back MVPs pretty recently. And we've seen with these quarterbacks, once they get old, they just kind of lose it. I mean, it happened to Favre. It happened to Peyton Manning. At Brady, it wasn't quite a precipitous drop-off, but he wasn't as good last year, even as he was his past 2 years in Tampa Bay. So at a certain point, and I hope it's not for the Jet fans' sake, certain point, the skills, once you get up there in that advanced age for a National Football League player, even at the quarterback position, it really falls off. So I have Herbert. Here's my 4. I have Herbert at number 4. I think since he's come into the league, 3 seasons he's been a starter. He's thrown for over, I think, 4,000 yards in each one of those years. This is a guy, there's not a thing he can't do on the planet. You can tell me, or on the football field, you can tell me they choked away that playoff game to the Jaguars last year. Yeah, but in order to get that lead, and I've stressed this going back to that 2016 Atlanta Falcon choke job, in order to get that lead, your quarterback has to play a great game. It's not on him. He's not calling the plays. Okay, and honestly, it's not even on that offensive coordinator. It's on the head coach to make the proper decisions and even take over there and see the game on a big picture scenario, because you got your play caller really looking at that, diner size menu or Cheesecake Factory size menu if you haven't been to a diner with a particularly big menu. So Herbert's number 4. He can do everything. He can run, throw. He's accurate. Number 5, I've got Lamar Jackson. This is a guy who won an MVP. Okay, and he's number 7 in Sando's list based on the tiers. He's won an MVP. He's been injured. Give him time to come back. He's produced for a long enough period of time where I'm putting him up there at 5. Number 6, I do have Rodgers. Like I said, there's a drop-off, a decline, but maybe he bounces back. Maybe just the whole thing going on with Green Bay. Should I retire? What should I do? Maybe that was weighing on him. I'm not ready to totally knock him off. So Rodgers at 6. For me, I've got Trevor Lawrence at 7. He's got Trevor Lawrence at 8. I think what he showed you towards the end of the year, with all the touchdowns he was able to throw and being able to orchestrate that comeback in the playoffs, I think he showed you he's deserving of that. He led the team from a pretty bad start to winning their division. I know it was the AFC South. It wasn't the NFC East, who had three teams in the Final Four of the conference, but he showed you enough there that he deserved to be at seventh. The next person you probably think that I would have higher, and you would probably think I don't have him higher because of the nature of the team he plays for. Jalen Hurts. Let's take Jalen Hurts number 8. Let's take a trip back down to January of 2022. Okay, and I remember being in a Costco on a Sunday early afternoon, and the Costco was in South Jersey, pretty close to where the Eagles play, and the store was empty. Why was the store empty? Everyone was watching Eagle playoff football. Understandable. All right, but Hurts he was horrific in that game. I'm not willing to just put that aside because he had one great year. And this is a guy that, like, personally, I'm a huge fan of. I know he plays for the Eagles, and I'm Mr. New York Giant, but I love the guy's story. He overcame a lot after being benched at Alabama, thriving at OU. We all get it. But you got to show me more than one season. And he only threw 22 touchdown passes last year. I know he ran for 13. And his completion percentage was actually less than Daniel Jones's, who's a guy that people just say can't play outside of the one lucky game he had against the Vikings in the playoffs. So keep it in mind. It's not like I'm saying he's not a top 10 quarterback. I have him firmly in there at 8. Sando has him in there at 6. Not that much of a discrepancy. So don't kill me. Don't say I'm being an Eagle hater. Don't throw that at me because I gave you facts. And the fact is that less than 2 years ago, people weren't sure if he could play. All right, number 9, Russell Wilson. Again, he was bad his last year in Seattle. He was bad last year in Denver. If it's bad this year, he's done. It's over. All right, then he won't be on this list next year. But I think his career accomplishments, he's got to bounce back. We all know what Sean Payton said about the head coach, who's now the Jet offensive coordinator, Nathaniel Hackett. Payton's going to coach him up. All right, I mean, Sean Payton won games when Teddy Bridgewater played quarterback. So he'll get him better. Will he be the, superstar that he once was? Think back 2018, 2019? Probably not. But I still think he'll be really good. Number 9 is probably about where I see him being. Number 10 is Deshaun Watson. All right, I'm not getting into the off-the-field stuff. The guy's a creep, point blank. We'll leave it at that. Now, he was a dominant player in 2019 and 2020 with the Texans. He won a playoff game because they lost in the 2019 season. They lost to the Chiefs, with the eventual Super Bowl champion. He sat out 2021. What do you want? Whether you want to call it a suspension, whatever. I mean, we're not getting into it. Last year, he missed 9 games. And I'm not getting into the whole contract manipulation thing either. I think everyone probably agrees on that. The guy can play. He was bad last year. He wasn't himself. I mean, it was a miracle that he was, coming back. But if you think about it, he was in a tricky spot after not playing for all this time. And now he had a full offseason. He played some games last year. I expect him to bounce back. So I got him at number 10. Matt Stafford is there. And these are the 2 guys I don't have. Matt Stafford at 10 for Mike Sando, and Dak Prescott at number 9. Prescott led the league in interceptions. Stafford, I mean, you can say what you want about him. I think he's been to 2 Pro Bowls. I know he won a Super Bowl. That was a really, really good Ram team. He had good receivers with like Cooper Kupp, Odell Beckham towards the end of the year. It's a good team. He's a good player. I don't know if he's a Hall of Famer. You're going to say, oh, Eli Manning's a Hall of Famer and they're similar numbers-wise career. Maybe, but Eli's got 2 Super Bowls. So I don't have him as a number 10 quarterback. He might be done. And I do think, though, that his Super Bowl win 2 years ago in 2021, I do think that's an incredible accomplishment, and it makes him look like significantly better because he's not just a pure stat guy. So he's a borderline Hall of Famer, but he's like a 2-time Pro Bowler. Everyone makes the Pro Bowl. There was a guy who made the Pro Bowl last year for the Ravens, that quarterback, Huntley, whatever his name was. And he's no good. He's barely a backup. So you got to do more than 2 Pro Bowls. All right, now, Colin Cowherd on his show, and I used to be much more into Cowherd. I'm still a big fan. I'll still watch his YouTube clips. I'll still watch his stuff on his own company, The Volume. He does a good job. He's entertaining. we're not getting to the Dwayne Haskins scenario. Rest in peace. But he put this out, I believe, last week at some point. Future NFL Hall of Famers. I'm going to read you the list. I'm consulting with the cell phone. Then I have a couple of thoughts here. Number one, he's got Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, I mean, I think if Mahomes decided he was over football and wanted to go back to his childhood passion of baseball, I think he's in. Travis Kelce, number two. If you look at Kelsey's numbers versus Gronk, and I'm not talking about like anything to do with blocking at all, Kelsey blows Gronk out of the way. Gronk never had over 100 catches in a season. I think Kelsey's done that a handful of times, or two times maybe. Rodgers, yeah, he's definitely a quarterback or a Hall of Famer, a quarterback. Trent Williams and Travis Kelce are 4 and 5. I can't really judge O linemen because there's not really stats you could look at. You really could look into the advanced analytics, but even those sometimes aren't accurate. You can look, stuff like win rate going up against a pass rusher one on one, which is, if you're going to study a bunch of film, it's pretty accurate, but it's not necessarily the best way of evaluating here on a top 10 type of list like this. So it's tough for me to judge Hall of Famers because really, or sorry, offensive linemen for Hall of Fame, because really the two guys that I've ever seen jump out and stand out, there's two of them. Lane Johnson, the right tackle of the Eagles, and I've been talking about this guy for probably 6 or 7 years. So don't say I hate everything Eagles. And Larry Allen, remember him with the Cowboys, number 73, just a massive. That was a man amongst boys. The guy could bench press 500 pounds for reps. He could squat 1,000. His just sheer girth. That stood out to me. Lane Johnson's more of like this athletic type of tackle because he was a former tight end. And I've said this for years. He can make pretty much every block. I've never seen a right tackle move like that. He can pull on run plays. So, but it's tough to judge. Again, O-line Hall of Famers. I know people love Kelce. He's probably, just from living in Philly the past couple of years, he's probably a top 5 most liked Philadelphia athlete. Definitely current, but maybe even all time. I think he's loved that much. You win a Super Bowl with the Eagles, obviously, then you're going to be pretty darn loved. Number 6, we have Aaron Donald. If you've heard me talk about sports, you know what I think about this guy. This is the no doubter. He sits at that bistro table with Lawrence Taylor, and maybe we'd invite Reggie White as the best 3 defensive players to ever walk the face of the earth. Number 7 is Myles Garrett. Yeah. He had 16 sacks in 16 games last year. Listen, the guy's a nutcase with that helmet swinging incident, which was like 4 years ago already. Like, everyone makes dumb decisions. Everyone does things they don't want to do. He paid the price for it, but you can't tell me that you want to block that guy straight up. He's a freak. So, yeah, I agree with him. So far, I agree with pretty much everyone here. I'm kind of like giving a no comment on Trent Williams and Jason Kelce. He's got Von Miller on here. Yeah, pretty darn good rusher. Won a couple of Super Bowls. I think he has somewhere in the neighborhood of 130 sacks. Bobby Wagner, the inside linebacker. You're really asking me to rely on reputation, so I'm going to pass on him too. I can't definitively say he's a Hall of Famer. Justin Tucker is number 10, the kicker. Yeah, he's a Hall of Famer. The NFL has put kickers in the Hall of Fame. There's, I believe, one punter in the Hall of Fame. So, yeah, I got no problem putting a kicker in the Hall of Fame. Don't make fun of the guy because he's a kicker. He's hit 60-plus yard field goals. He's done it with, like, historical accuracy. So, yeah, I agree. The only one I'm not 100% sure is Bobby Wagner. So he would be a no. And then Trent Williams and Jason Kelce, I'm not exactly sure because it's just so tough. Unless you're breaking down all sorts of film, it's just real tough to break down these offensive linemen. Then he's got in the waiting room, he's got Joe Burrow, which if he wins a Super Bowl, he's in there for me. No questions asked. Justin Jefferson, the receiver, yeah, he's put up big-time numbers, like better than Randy Moss, big-time. T.J. Watt, yeah, probably. He's won a Defensive Player of the Year. I could see that happen. Patrick Surtain II, who's a corner. I don't know enough about him yet. I know he's really young. Micah Parsons, yeah, if he continues at that pace, absolutely. We saw DeMarcus Ware go into the Hall of Fame last week, and he's a pretty similar player. Nick Bosa, yeah, I could see that with his pass rushing ability. And another inside linebacker, Fred Warner. I don't know enough about inside linebackers. I mean, Lawrence Taylor was an outside linebacker. You could see it with the pass rush. the most notable like inside linebackers, you really have to go back quite a distance. You've got Ray Lewis, you've got Urlacher, but you really have to go back to guys like was it like Ray Nitschke with the Packers in the '60s and Butkus with the Bears around that time period. L.C. Greenwood with the Steelers in the '70s. I don't even know if he was an inside or an outside backer. I know Carl Banks and like Harry Carson. Those were guys who played inside too. I think one of them did. Again, it's tough for me to evaluate these inside linebackers. So I do agree with most of these. I think honestly, like Myles Garrett, if you're putting him only at 7, I don't know if it's because he's, this is only going to be his 7th year in the league, but the guy has something like 74 sacks in 84 games or something. So if he plays 14 years, double it. Yeah, he's definitely there. I really like Myles Garrett as a player. I think he's just tremendously underrated. This might be the new guy like Aaron Donald that I just keep talking about and shout it from mountaintops and just never stop talking about the guy like I've done with Aaron Donald for several years now. All right, now, Hard Knocks. I had a chance to watch it earlier this morning, and I had for you 6 thoughts about the first episode. And I think that they're all over the place. And I did this really without writing anything down, just kind of going off memory. The 6 things that stood out the most. We got a lot of lists here today on the Sauce Rant Pod. So the first thing is Robert Saleh. He's incredibly handsome. I went today and I shaved my head right after watching it. See it, nice and high and tight here, no facial hair, totally bald, because I was like, he looks pretty good. Like, all I need is, lose 30 pounds, put on 20 pounds of muscles, go get contacts or LASIK eye surgery, and I'd probably look just like him. So, yeah, Robert Saleh is pretty darn good looking. On a serious note, though, I can work on the tan because I'm going to go play pickleball tomorrow, hit the Jersey Shore right after, and then go out there on my birthday on Saturday with all of the fellas from the old stomping grounds, and we're going to go play golf in the Poconos. So if you hear, people being loud, if you're up in that Pocono area, it's probably the 8 of us from Limbrook, and I think we got one guy from Massachusetts coming in, a buddy of a buddy, and then one guy from Rosedale, Queens. But the other 5, the fellas from Limbrook High School. So if you hear us and you're in that Pocono area, you'll probably hear us loud and clear as we, whack the golf balls into the trees and, go searching for them as we all hit slices and hooks off the tee and enjoy ourselves. But on a serious note, I'll try to get that tan up to Robert Saleh's standard. So number 1, Robert Saleh, tremendously handsome. Number 2, Aaron Rodgers seems like a really cool guy. I'm glad we're away from all this talk about being immunized versus vaccinated and dark rooms and other things that's going on in his personal life and women he's dating. He seems like a genuine, cool, down-to-earth guy. Seems like he's happy just to be refreshed in a different scenario with the Jets. Number 3, and this was like the weirdest, most random thing. Method Man, the rapper, coming in and talking to the team, reading a Bill Parcells quote. I mean, what's next? Lloyd Banks is going to come to Giants camp and read a Tom Coughlin quote? Just strange there. Kind of cool. Strange. And I mean, the Jets have a lot of famous fans, even a lot of famous broadcasters like a Rich Eisen and, who's the other big one who's like a noted Jet fan? There's someone else, but there's a lot of people who are Jet fans. I mean, heck, even Tony Soprano himself, James Gandolfini, R.I.P., he was a diehard Jet fan. So the Jets have a lot of these huge, like, famous personalities, people who root for them. Adam Sandler, that's one. The Giants have a lot too, but they've got real big time fans of them. So Method Man being there, who knew he was a Jet fan? Number 4, Sauce Gardner and Nick Van Exel, the old point guard with the Lakers and the Nuggets at University of Cincinnati graduation. That was pretty cool. 2 random athletes. And it's impressive there that Sauce finished his degree, even though he's a top player in the league. He was number 18 on the top 100. So I thought that was pretty cool that he went back to finish his degree. His mom was into it, his grandma was into it, all that. Number five, another constant thing throughout the whole series there was that Zach Wilson is kind of in a pretty tough spot, but he seemed to understand being the number two because there's a Hall of Famer there, and it probably helps him that his salary didn't get reduced, and now he doesn't need to play, and he can kind of develop in a pressure-free environment. And a topic kind of for like later future studies is with these rookie quarterbacks, is it better that they go right in or they do most notably what Patrick Mahomes did where he played one game his rookie year and then sat and then he was just off and running. So maybe Zach Wilson has that time to kind of do what Mahomes did, but do it for possibly 2 years, depending on what the Jets do. I mean, maybe if the Jets win the Super Bowl, Rodgers walks away and it's back to being Zach Wilson's team. So who knows? And number six, this is kind of like another prevailing thought. It's not just a one-off thing with Sauce Gardner and Nick Van Exel, is the genuine brotherhood that appears that is the NFL. It seems like all these guys want the others to have good, strong careers. It seems like there's a friendliness even after games where even players who haven't met, they respect the process and the hard work that it takes to make the National Football League. So even a guy like Dorian Thompson Robinson or DTR, who played at UCLA and is a fifth-round rookie with the Browns, quarterback, he can go up and, say hello to Aaron Rodgers before the game. And, even though DTR doesn't, has not accomplished what anything really, he's a rookie and probably won't be the quarterback that Aaron Rodgers is or has been since 2008 when he started to play. It says a lot that these guys are willing to not, big time anyone. And maybe it's just Rodgers because the episode was pretty much about Aaron Rodgers, let's face it. But I think that that's pretty cool that these guys, all respect each other. Tiki Barber made a cameo there too. And I don't know if Robert Saleh played in the league, but he's coached enough in the league where he respects it enough that a guy like Tiki Barber, who's doing work with FAN, he's doing afternoon drive now with Evan Roberts, but he's there at camp and, he's chatting with him because even if Saleh, who, again, I don't think played in the NFL, they respect what a guy like Tiki Barber was able to do, who was dominant at certain stretches in his career. So just the genuine respect that everyone kind of involved in the NFL has for one another, not just the players, I guess, if we tied it all in. Maybe, though, with DTR and Aaron Rodgers, it's a little bit of Pac-12 love. So I think that's an interesting transition here. And I did a whole pod on this. You can go back and listen. That Arizona joining the Big 12, I said this needed to happen. It was pretty obvious. College realignment, it's a little messy if you're not talking about football, but because football only one game a week. The other sport's going to be a little messy, but football's paying for it for the most part, the revenue that they generate. So if this is what needs to happen, it's okay. The one thing with college football, though, that is not going to be present with these massive conferences now with the Big 10 and the Big 12, who knows how many teams each one's going to have. Big 12 is going to be at 16. Big 10, who knows if they add they're going to add Washington and Oregon, but who knows? Maybe Cal, maybe Stanford, who knows? You lose that on like the regional rivalries unless you're in the SEC, because the SEC is really just from Missouri to the northwest down to Florida to the southeast. So you're not really, it's not a huge necessary geographical area. It's not necessarily something you can drive to like Arizona to Arizona State or even like Arizona or Arizona State to UCLA or USC where it's 6 or 7 hours or an hour flight. The regionalism is kind of taken away when Arizona has to go play Cincinnati or West Virginia, or BYU has to play at UCF. But overall, I'm glad Arizona's going to the Big 12. It makes sense, and like I said, you get Arizona versus Kansas basketball. What could be better than that? Honestly, from college basketball standpoint, those are two big time programs historically. Kansas much more history, Arizona a little more recently, and they haven't quite done the same number of winning, but they've been to, was it 4 Final Fours, 5 Final Fours, whatever. It's been a minute since I went to a game there at McHale Center where they do the little intro and they say either 4 Final Fours or 5 Final Fours. I can't remember. I could try to count it right now, but I don't know how productive that would be. 01, 97, 94, and then one in the 80s. The question was there another in the 90s? Doesn't matter. So 01, 97, somewhere in the 80s, maybe another one in the 90s. So Arizona, Kansas, Big 12 basketball coming to an arena near you. All right, now, This is the topic that I just can't let go. All right, and we'll probably finish up the rant here because I've talked for nearly 40 straight minutes here. But I've got to talk about the New York Yankees, all right? And it pains me that I have to because this team is just middling and they're mediocre and they don't score runs. But what's setting this off for me is the Bob Clappish report that's out. Clappish has been covering baseball probably longer than I've been alive. I'm not even sure, quite frankly, who he's with. Maybe Newsday, maybe NJ.com, doesn't matter. But this guy's well connected, all right? And the report that's being let out by him is that Brian Cashman is safe. Brian Cashman should not be safe from the chopping block. I don't care that he's friends with the Steinbrenner family. I don't care if they do an ornament exchange every Christmas. I don't care if he brings over corned beef and cabbage every St. Patty's Day. I don't care if they make latkes together every Hanukkah. I don't care if they look for the afikoman on every Passover. This guy needs to be gone. The roster is a joke. This isn't working. I know they're over 500. I know they're technically not out of it. This season is on him. It's not on Boone. Boone's the manager. They've shown you what they think of the manager in Major League Baseball. The guy's probably not even making $1 million. Yes, that's a lot of money for people like you and me walking around on the street. But the guy barely makes any money. All he does, and I'm taking this term from Sal Licata, is he applies the data given to him by the front office. Who's in charge of the front office and the analytics? Brian Cashman. This isn't a winning team. Boone is standing on his head practically. He's mimicking umpires, getting thrown out at an unprecedented clip to do anything to try to wake up these bats and get the team hitting. This is one of the most poorly constructed Yankee teams of my entire lifetime. I don't care if they finish over 500 and they win 82 or 83 games or 84 games, whatever. The team is not properly constructed. The last time that, I could think about this team being so poorly constructed where you had a mix of guys making a lot of money and not living up to it was probably, say, 2013, 2014. Does the name Zoilo Almonte ring a bell to you? And Lyle Overbay. Overbay was a longtime major leaguer. Zoilo Almonte was not. Almonte played in 34 of his 50 or so major league games that year, and they kept throwing him out there even though he had a 576 OPS in 2013. Overbay, who had been a career first baseman, sometimes getting DH, I guess, if he was in an American League team like Toronto and he played with Pittsburgh, so maybe an interleague series here and there. He, even for a stretch, he had to go out and play right field because the team was so poorly constructed. A career first baseman towards the end of his career. Like they literally didn't have a right fielder in 2013. Overbay was hitting like cleanup, playing right field at times for this team in 2013. 2014, a guy that jumps to mind is Jan Hervis Solarte, who was traded for Chase Headley. And I think he hit in the middle of the order at times for the Yankees. I think he hit like 2 or 5 a couple of times. So beginning or middle of the order there. This Yankee team is just as badly put together. I'll read the lineup from yesterday in a little. But to pull an old Colin Cowherd reference, sometimes you have to get a divorce. Cashman might get a job somewhere else. He might put together a pennant-winning team, a World Series-winning team, a team that goes to the playoffs 7 or 8 straight years. And that's okay. You can't stay the GM forever. He's been there since like the late 90s. I was walking the halls of R.W. Carbonaro Elementary School in Valley Stream, New York. My parents sold that house in 2001, right after 9/11. We moved out. I mean, you can't be there forever. It's not working. This team has guys making $1 trillion who aren't producing. Giancarlo Stanton, Josh Donaldson. I mean, that's, 55, 60 million, give or take, right there. Davy Garcia, we were told, was this big-time prospect. I remember in 2020, during the COVID year in the playoffs, they tried to play cat and mouse with the Tampa Bay Rays and threw him out there. And they said they weren't. He was DFA'd. I mean, this was supposed to be another big-time prospect, and the Yankees hold these prospects, and they're never really any good. So if you're going to overhype these prospects and get someone to believe Cashman, and I've mentioned this before, just trade them. They're probably not any good anyway. And I get it. You haven't been picking in the beginning of the draft. We mentioned the hideous contracts he's given, and I can't crush him for LeMahieu. This was a guy though when he brought him in was an absolute steal. He's making like 11 million in his a year or 12 million a year in his first contract. And 2019 he hit like 26 home runs. He had like a 280 something average. It was just a really good guy, good hitter who didn't strike out a ton. The next year in the COVID shortened year he hits like 360 or something. It's a great value signing, but then they paid him a big time deal and he stinks. Now with Giancarlo Stanton, who I've mentioned a couple of times already, it's a bad contract. I hate to say it because the morning that I found that they traded for Giancarlo Stanton, I was running around Scottsdale, Arizona, celebrating and blasting the Star Wars Evil Empire Yankee song in my tiny little Nissan Sentra, driving there on Hayden Road and Indian School Road and Thomas Road and Camelback Road, bouncing around, Old Town Scottsdale, all pumped up because the Yankees acquired a guy who had just hit almost 60 home runs that year, and you paired him with Gary Sanchez, who was supposed to be amazing, coming off a year where he had like 33 home runs and like 90 driven in and had like a 380 on base percentage. I thought this was going to be the right-handed version of Murderer's Row, with Judge, of course, coming off a 50-something home run performance. The truth is, though, about these Cashman-led Yankees, since my favorite little radio host, Christopher Mad Dog Russo, declared in October 7, 2017, when the Yankees were up 3-2 against the Astros in the ALCS, that Houston was an absolutely gutless team. This team has owned us in every way possible. We're not close to the Astros. Even when they lose players like Correa and Springer and Cole and Greinke, it doesn't matter. Like they find guys, Christian Javier, for example, pitchers, hitters, and they replace them. Now, another scary stat that I saw, and this is just insane with Cashman. We've talked about WAR before, and putting value on WAR, wins above replacement, obviously. The third highest WAR by a position player that the Yankees have drafted is Anthony Volpe. Doesn't count for international guys like Matsui or Cano. It goes Brett Gardner is number one, Aaron Judge is number two, and Anthony Volpe is number three. And it's like the gap between Gardner and Judge is like 9 or so wins above replacement. Volpe's like down at 2 when Judge is at like 35, or Volpe's at like 2.9 or something. It's staggering. And again, to show you just how bad of a team he's put together, I've got here the Yankees lineup on August 10th, 2016. This was 7 years ago. I'm going to read you the lineup, and then we're going to see here, compared to what the Yankees are putting out today or yesterday even, and just do a little comparison just to show how ridiculous of a lineup this is. And this was right before A-Rod retired. But here, let me go through this lineup. I got to find it here. 2016, August 10th. I had it up, and now we did not. But let's see, 2016. All right, let's see. Yankees, Red Sox, August 10, 2016. All right, here is the Yankees lineup that day. We had Brett Gardner leading off. We had Ellsbury second, Headley, Mark Teixeira, Starlin Castro, Didi Gregorius, Gary Sanchez DHing, Austin Romine catching, Aaron Hicks playing right field. All right, so in that lineup, the Yankees didn't make the playoffs that year. They made a push at the end when they sold off all those relievers, Andrew Miller and Chapman and whatnot. But you had Ellsbury, who was a bad Yankee, bad contract. Him and Starling Marte were hitting over 270. Gary Sanchez was a dominant player at that point in 2016, coming up as a rookie. He had 20 home runs in a really short stretch. Gardy was leading off. 350 on base percentage. Not amazing, but very respectable at that leadoff role. You had Didi in there who had 20 home runs that year and hit 275 also. I mean, compared to this year from yesterday, and I'm not going to read the whole lineup, but Jake Bauers leading off with a 305 on base percentage, not good. Judge hitting 2, yeah, he's amazing. Torres is slightly above average major league player. All right. Stanton hit cleanup yesterday. I guess I'm going to almost go through the whole lineup. Billy McKinney can't be hitting 5. Okay, he's got slightly above average OPS. And for reference, OPS for this year in Major League Baseball for the average player is 729. On base percentage is 320. So he's less than that on the on base, but his OPS I think is around like 740 or so when I checked earlier today. So it's not good. I'm not even going to bring up like the 2009 Yankees who won the World Series because they had a guy like Cano hitting seventh. That was the best infield of all time. Teixeira, Cano, Jeter hit like 330 that year, stole 30 bases, hit 17 home runs in the number one spot in the order. You had Johnny Damon who hit like 20 something home runs in the number two spot. But to continue the infield, you had A-Rod also hit over 30 home runs. So I'm not even bringing that up. Even like the 2018 Yankees who flamed out against Boston there in the division series. It's bad. Cashman's done a bad job. You got to get rid of him. All right, and the last thing we'll touch on as we come up here, nearly over 50 minutes here, Kevin Brown, not the former Yankee pitcher, amongst other teams. Kevin Brown, the Orioles announcer. I mean, this is the one thing in the history of the world that all of Twitter, all of social media completely agrees on. The guy did nothing wrong. The Orioles are going through an amazing season. People want the Orioles to be good. They're kind of an underdog. They're in a smaller market city. They're in the shadow of a really powerful city, even if DC is not the biggest city. But DC's powerful, obviously, for obvious reasons. Baltimore's kind of like one of those classic, just like baseball towns. Camden Yards is amazing. The only baseball game I've been to this year was at Camden Yards with the Yankees there. So to stoop to that level is pretty pathetic, where you got your team in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. We'll leave it at that. Josh Hart, last thing, I guess. Josh Hart signed an extension, about $20 million a year. That's the going rate, so not much thoughts there. I'm pumped for the Knicks to come back because I think they've got a chance to continue upon what they built last year. All right. Schloss Rant live from the Philadelphia suburbs, a mega pod today.